Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Rick Fussell and this is the Ingrain Workshop. In today's video, we're going to be building an awl out of an old drill bit. That's coming up next here at the Ingrain Workshop. First thing I had to do was find the right drill bit. So I dug out my trusty old Bosch Hornet hammer drill, you know, the one that sounds like a jackhammer on caffeine. Then I sifted through my collection of ancient cement drill bits, looking for the one that had already given up on life. Luckily me, I found a 1/4-inch bit that had lost its head, kind of like me when I've misplaced my tape measure for the 10th time. Next, I grabbed some painter's tape and marked the drill bit exactly 1 inch from the end, because precision is key, or at least that's what I tell myself. This is where I'll start shaping the awl's point over at the grinder. With the bit chucked up in the drill, I'll spin it against the wheel to round out the profile, kind of like a blacksmith, but with power tools and a few dramatic sparks. Of course, I'll dunk it in water occasionally to keep the steel from overheating and losing its temper, because the last thing I need in my shop is more things losing their temper, including me. With the basic profile shaped, it's time to head over to the belt sander with some 120 grit sandpaper and start smoothing things out. Kind of like giving the drill bit a spa treatment, just with more noise and fewer cucumbers. Just like before, I'll keep the bit chucked up in the drill to maintain that nice, even, rounded profile. From here, it's all about working through the sanding grits, starting with 220 and working my way up to 600. Basically, I'm giving this all the red carpet treatment, smoothing out every imperfection until it's so polished it's feeling fancy. Now it's time to head over to the forge, or at least my version one. First, I'll pour out some motor oil for the quench, because nothing says precision craftsmanship like repurposing some old fluids from the garage. Then I'll break out my MAP gas torch and start heating up the bit until it's glowing. Finally, I'll go in for the quench. Sure, it's a little less dramatic than an actual Forged in Fire episode. No roaring flames, no panel of judges critiquing my every move, but at least I don't have to hear someone say, "Your awl will not cut." Next, I'll hit the bit with the wire wheel for a final cleanup, kind of like brushing its teeth before a big show. Then it's off to the buffing wheel for the grand finale. With a little polish, I'll buff out the drill bit until it shines like it's about to sell me a used car. At this point, it's looking so good, I might just have to start carrying it around just to show it off. Now it's time to make the handle. I've got a nice 2-inch by 3.5-inch walnut blank, and I'll start shaping the profile over at the lathe. First, I'll use my gouge to round the blank, because no one likes a square peg in a round hole. Once that's done, I'll grab a 5/8-inch brass flare cap and with my calipers measure the depth of the threads. Then I'll mark the distance on the blank. And oh yeah, sorry for the inevitable elbow shot, turning videos always come with a free view of my arm. Using my parting tool, I'll cut the end down to match the inside diameter of the brass threads, plus an extra 1/16 of an inch for a snug fit and also cut in the threads. Finally, I'll remove the tailstock so I can finish cutting it down to its final diameter, because trying to do that with the tailstock in the way is just asking for trouble. Now it's time to cut in the threads on the end of my handle, and instead of getting fancy, I'll keep it simple. I'll just take the brass flare nut, grab a socket set, and thread it right onto the blank. No high-tech jigs, no special tools, just good old-fashioned elbow grease. Once the threads are cut in, I'll mark the outside diameter of the nut on the blank, then remove it so I can continue shaping the profile. Using a small bowl gouge, I'll start tapering from the end up toward the middle of the handle. The key here is to be careful not to take off too much material at the end, otherwise the brass nut might end up looser than my excuses for buying more woodworking tools. With the brass nut back on the blank, it's time to break out the file and start rounding it over, because right now it's about as sharp as my supervisor's eye when I accidentally track sawdust into the house. Once I've got the profile nice and round, I'll go through the sanding grits, starting with 120 and working my way up to 600. Just like with the drill bit, this will take it from rough around the edges to silky smooth. With a drill head chucked up in my tailstock, I'll start by using a 1/16-inch drill bit to make a pilot hole right in the center of what once was a brass nut, but at this point it's just a fancy ring. A nut that lost its thread, kind of like me after too many late nights in the shop. Once the pilot hole is in, I'll swap out for a 1/4 inch bit and add some painter's tape as a depth marker, because eyeballing it usually leads to regret. Then I'll drill out the hole for the awl, making sure to stop before I accidentally turn this handle into a flute. With the normal tailstock back in place, it's time to finish shaping the handle. Using my small bowl gouge, I'll taper up from the awl end toward the middle, slow and steady, no sudden moves. Then for the top, I'll round it over so it fits flush in the palm of my hand, because nothing ruins a good project like an uncomfortable grip. Once the handle profile is complete, I'll sand it just like before, working through the grits until it's as smooth as a well-rehearsed excuse for why I need another tool. Finally, I'll grab my parting tool and cut the handle free from the blank. Hopefully at this point it doesn't try to make a last-minute escape across the shop floor. With some tape around the brass ring, I mounted the handle to the headstock side of the lathe so I can sand the top. No sense in having a smooth body and a rough top. This isn't a bad haircut. With the handle now completely sanded, it's time to apply the finish. I'm keeping it simple with tung oil and wax because sometimes the classics just work. Plus, it gives the handle a nice, rich look without making it feel like I dipped it in a vat of syrup. With the finish dry, I taped off the handle and headed over to the buffing wheel to polish up the brass ring. A little buffing and it's shining like it actually belongs on a well-made tool instead of in the junk drawer. Using some 2-part epoxy, I'll fasten the awl to the handle. But before that, I did a little prep work, cutting some grooves along the shank of the awl at the grinder. This helps the epoxy grip better, kind of like adding texture to a slippery floor. Except this time I actually want something to stick. With the brass ring taped off and the awl shaft also taped off, because cleanup is never as fun as building, I'll carefully set the awl into place while the handle is secured in my vise. Now all that's left to do is let the epoxy cure and resist the urge to poke things with it before it's fully set. And that's it, one custom built awl ready for action. It started as a worn out drill bit and a chunk of walnut, and now is a tool I'll probably reach for more often than I admit. Hopefully this will give you a few ideas, maybe a few laughs, and if nothing else, a good excuse to fire up the lathe. If you enjoyed the build, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, thanks for hanging out in the Ingrain Workshop, where the tools are sharp, the jokes are questionable, and the supervisor is always watching. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, then please leave it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then I highly recommend that you smash that subscribe button. It's free and painless, and I'd also ask that you ring that bell icon. That way you'll be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all my existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support that you've given this channel. Now I'll leave links in the video description below to where you can pick up any tools and equipment that I might have used on this project. And just remember, the best tool in your workshop isn't a Festool or a Makita or DeWalt, it's the one that you make. I'm Rick with the Ingrain Workshop. Have a wonderful day and God bless.